Should you use margin or leverage for your investments? Well, I personally don't. However, I'm going to contrast my opinion with that of Charlie Munger, who has in his investment career utilized leverage in certain scenarios. And so we're going to talk more about that in this video. So guys, as you smash that like button, let me run that intro. What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, a lot of us became aware subsequent to Charlie Munger's purchase of shares in Alibaba that he actually used margin or leverage to make that position. And so, before we move on to anything else, let's take a look at what Charlie said about using leverage and margin as it relates to investments.
Charlie, this question comes from Michael Gallagher. He says, according to company filings, it appeared that Alibaba shares were purchased with leverage, and when the stock price fell last year, he was seemingly forced to sell, he being you. Can you ask Charlie to confirm that it was bought with leverage? And if so, why would he do that, as it seems to go against his philosophy? I got several questions that were similar to that.
Well, yes, it's true. I operated with no leverage for long stretches of my old age, and Warren's the same way. And recently I did use a little bit of leverage here and in another place, because the opportunities were so ridiculously good. I thought it was desirable to do that. So you're right, it's unusual for us, but we did find a few things. And by the way, if you go back early in my career, I used some leverage. I sometimes ask myself a mental question. I say, what is the appropriate percentage of your net worth you should put it in a stock if you think it's an absolute cinch? Well, if you're the kind of fellow who's right and when you think something is a cinch, the answer is 100%, or maybe 150%. But nobody teaches people to think that way in finance. But if the opportunity is great enough, the logical answer is 100%, or maybe 200%.
So is
you
leverage?
Could argue that I use that leverage to buy BYD. You can argue that's the best thing I've ever done for the Daily Journal.
So is leverage the least evil of the three L's?
I think most people should avoid it, but maybe not everybody need play by those rules. I have a friend who says, the young man knows the rules and the old man knows the exceptions.
And so his position is that effectively he uses leverage sparingly. Now, that's something that I can get behind. However, I generally don't use any margin at all. The only time I might use a little bit of leverage is if I made a position and it put me into a little bit of leverage. It just so happened that that's how the trade went. And so I might have gone into like 0.5% leverage or margin, but I generally don't use it. And the reason why I don't use it is because you never know what could happen, right? The stock market could essentially collapse tomorrow. And we've, at least in my lifetime, have gone through at least 3 periods where the stock market seriously collapsed. Back in 2000, then we had the 2008 crash, and then we also had the 2020 crash in March of 2020. And so you never know what could happen. And so I try not to be leveraged in any sort of like material way, if at all, because I don't want to be the one getting a margin call. And with that said, I want to talk to you guys about a story that occurred actually to a friend's father of mine. So, back in the early 2000s, Charlie in that clip told you that, he believes in using leverage in certain scenarios that are like fantastic, exceptional types of opportunities. And, one situation where people thought that the stock market in general or specific tech companies were fantastic once-in-a-lifetime type opportunities was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I know a lot of the people that watch this channel were not around back then, but in the comments, if you were around there, let the young guys know or young girls know exactly how much exuberance there was in the market. Like, tell people what your story was and what you saw. But there was a lot of sort of excitement in the security markets back then. And I actually had a friend whose father actually mortgaged his house to invest in the securities markets at that time because he thought that the opportunity was fantastic. And so, as you can imagine, we all know how that went. The tech names actually blew up and, he lost money. And so this is one of those situations where, like, even if I find an opportunity that's absolutely fantastic, absolutely exceptional, I will be very careful if I ever even try or think about using margin. The only way, or leverage, the only way that I probably could see myself using leverage is if I know that I have that particular cash flow coming in over the next year from my own like employment income or other investment incomes that's not correlated with the stock market or something. In other words, the most that I would take is maybe like half a year's worth of income that's coming in on a tax basis that's coming from other situations. But that is like the extent of what I would do, but that would also be an exceptional opportunity. I've never seen those. You guys see I'm very careful, very conservative. For the last little while I've been in a lot of cash, and so we'll see how that plays out into the future, but I don't see myself utilizing leverage at all. But there is one particular scenario where I do use leverage, and this is actually an interesting way of utilizing it. Is if, you know, I haven't done this in many years, but one way to sort of write cash secured puts is if you have sort of like a line of credit available. Now, for anyone who's taken like med school or an MBA like myself or anything like that, you get these lines of credits, and I've actually been able to keep mine and just convert it into a regular line of credit. And it's just this huge amount of capital that's available that I don't pay any maintenance fees on or anything. But one of the things you could do is you could write a cash secured put and not actually have that secured portion in your portfolio, but you know that it's secured because if you do get exercised on that cash secured put, you can utilize the capital that's available in that line of credit that you're not currently using. And so that's one way that you can use free leverage. And so, you know, if you want to write a really out of the money cash secured put that likely won't exercise, and, you know, it's got like a 6% yield, well, that might just be another extra 6%. You know, that's not advice. I'm not telling you to do that, but that's an interesting way where I could potentially see using margin or leverage. I guess it's not really margin, it's more leverage, but I guess in the portfolio, they might look at it as margin because they don't know you have access to that capital. So you're going to have to secure it a little bit in some way, because the people who allow you to write these options do want security anyway. So you might get like a little bit of a margin call if your position looks like it's going to be exercised and the value of the cash secured put goes down or whatever it is. And so you might have to move some of that capital over early. But in other words, what I'm pointing out is that you are free from like life altering or portfolio altering margin calls because you have that capital set aside. So that's the only scenario where I can see myself using a type of leverage. Otherwise, I just don't in my portfolio, and I don't see many situations where I would. And so, you know, to the question that you guys always ask, this is the Q&A series, so I do want to answer it. So to your question, would I use or would I recommend using margin or leverage in my portfolios? Absolutely not. I don't do it. I agree that, you know, people who are super experts like Charlie Munger purchasing Alibaba, it might have been a good opportunity for him, but even at the time where I was even like doubling down into Alibaba, I never once thought about using leverage or margin. I don't think I will anytime soon. And so I'll leave it there, guys. Let me know what questions you have on margin or anything like that in the questions below. And of course, guys, I know that a lot of you guys are finding this Q&A series very helpful. And so if you've missed any of the videos, no problem. I linked the whole series right here.